Warrior Queen Mmanthatisi, like many great African kings such as Sekhukhune, Faku, and Cetshwayo, took the Batlokwa throne by force and eliminated anyone who stood in her way. In a military career that resulted in the conquering of almost 30 tribes, she is said to have defeated King Zwide of amaNdwandwe and King Moshoeshoe of Basotho. Mmanthatisi was a tall and attractive woman, light brown in complexion. She married Kgosi Mokotjo, who was born with a strange illness and died peacefully at the age of 27 in the nurturing care of his queen. Upon the death of the king, Mmanthatisi took his royal mantle, covered herself, and convened a council meeting where she declared herself Queen Regent, going against many Batlokwa traditions and customs. One notable Motlokwa elder named Makgetha commented that, "I've always known that the queen had an unusual talent, but never expected her to forcefully adorn herself with the royal mantle and have Batlokwa calling her king unexpectedly." On the other hand, Pokanoka, another prominent Motlokwa, expressed his support for Queen Mmanthatisi and claimed that her leadership skills would be useful to Batlokwa. He proclaimed, "It is clear that today Batlokwa has found themselves a leader who understands and will carry out their goals. In my opinion, the queen knows what we desire, which is to grab our weapons and make a name for ourselves." Sehalahala, Kgosi Mokotjo's brother, opposed Mmanthatisi's leadership and felt that she's a foreigner who was born a Musia, and that the people wanted to be ruled by a pure Motlokwa such as himself. Others resented being led by a woman, and there were those who felt that she had taken advantage of the trust King Mokotjo placed in her prior to his death in 1813. These criticisms reached Kgosi Mmanthatisi's ears, and showing her darker side, she took exception to them. She was determined to deal harshly with the critics, who included male cultural brokers and ideologues who believed in patriarchy. All those who were critical of her were called into the Khotla Council, and Mmanthatisi did not mince her words in ridiculing them and calling them rebels. Although Queen Regent Mmanthatisi was regarded as an iron lady by some, not everybody viewed her in this way. She embodied care, not only for her subjects, but also for those who came to her territory to seek refuge. One of the best examples of this is when Motshodi, leader of a small group of amaHlubi, came with his people to ask for refuge, and Queen Mmanthatisi accepted them with open arms. She included amaHlubi in her military attacks on other nations in order to grow her nation. Motshodi was also given the task of presiding over some issues as per Mmanthatisi's request. After some time, when visiting the Queen's royal residence, Motshodi was accused of always bringing his own food to avoid eating from the same pot as Batlokwa. In his defense, he claimed that he was afraid to eat the food offered to him, saying it had been sacrificed to the spirit of Mokotjo, a sneaky way of accusing Mmanthatisi of poisoning her husband. To Mmanthatisi and the entire Tlokwa nation, this was a very grave allegation, and Mmanthatisi was left with no other option than to deal swiftly and decisively with Motshodi and his subject. After this stance by Queen Mmanthatisi, her subjects started praising her for her strong leadership. She also tested her military power and tactics by sending her people to attack King Zwide, the powerful monarch of amaNdwandwe. Zwide was caught unprepared and easily defeated. In this attack, Mmanthatisi confiscated many cattle from amaNdwandwe. Queen Mmanthatisi ordered her son Sekhukhune to execute Motshodi. Armed only with his spear, he beheaded Motshodi and had some of his subjects killed. Motshodi's death triggered a sense of revenge by amaHlubi, who were led by Mpangazitha. The attack by amaHlubi caught Batlokwa and Mmanthatisi off guard. They fled their homesteads and sought refuge among Basia territories, while amaHlubi destroyed almost everything. This was a tough period for warrior Queen Mmanthatisi and her subjects. Mmanthatisi's brother, Letlaka, invited her to stay, but she refused as some of her followers had planned to take the cattle of their hosts. Kgosi of Batlokwa, who lived nearby, was another who offered sanctuary and assistance, but this she also refused. Kgosi Mmanthatisi was afraid of losing the independence of her nation, especially since the Moggalong branch was the senior house compared to her, Batlokwa. She also had reason to believe that Nkgahle had been involved in some treachery aimed at deposing her, and so she did not trust him. She was also worried that Mbangazitha might follow their trails and come to finish them off while also invading the people of her birth. When warrior Queen Mmanthatisi was on the move, she would conquer smaller nations and use her victims as reinforcements to the Batlokwa nation. Although viewed as a conqueror, she sometimes had a soft spot for those survivors who were not in the battle. In most cases, she would make sure the defeated tribe's refugees were absorbed. Gathering numbers of refugees became one of the unusual tactics which differentiated her from other leaders of her time, and was yet another example of her leadership skills. During her regency, Mmanthatisi ruled over 40,000 people and defeated 28 tribes. Exercising the duties of a king, consulting elders for advice, advancing her military and political authority, and adjudicating disputes. In time, her people started referring to themselves as Mmanthatisi, according her the usual tribute given to powerful kings. There are two versions of the Battle of Ditagong, one being that Batlokwa of Queen Mmanthatisi were joined by other Basotho clans to attack Marabing and the Griqua led by Barons and Adamkok II. The combined Basotho force suffered terrible casualties and were forced to flee after a devastating loss. The second version is that the Europeans, especially Reverend Moffat, who either could not or would not differentiate black people from each other, would refer to any aggressive Basotho clan as the so-called Mmanthatisi horde. Oral tradition tells us that the group which attacked Marabing were in fact a coalition of Maputing, Batlokwana, and Bafokeng. Although Mmanthatisi was portrayed as an evil woman by the Europeans, who went as far as nicknaming her the Destroyer of Nations, tradition maintains that she was polite and admired for her intelligence. She was a strong, capable, and popular leader, both in war and in peace. Her popularity is shown by the fact that to this day, there are still Batlokwa Basibidi who refer to themselves as Batlokwa Mmanthatisi, which is unheard of in Tlokwa history. In the present-day Free State, Mmanthatisi forced Bataung and Bafokeng across Lekwa, the Vaal River. At this time, she was looking for a resting place as her nation was fatigued from the wars. Batlokwa Mmanthatisi approached Botabote, occupied by King Moshoeshoe and his people, and they forced them out. This is when King Moshoeshoe fled and settled at Tababusiu, escaping the wrath of Queen Mmanthatisi. She eventually settled at the mountain strongholds of Marabing, while her son and heir settled at another stronghold close by at Jwalaboholo, located east of Vicksburg in the Free State, which was first occupied by Bakwena. It was later wrestled from them by Batlokwa under the command of Mmanthatisi. This natural fortress served as her capital for many years. It was here that many a conquest was planned. In 1824, when Mmanthatisi felt that her son Sekhukhune was ready to take over, she retired and made him the sole ruler of Batlokwa politics and military. Even after Sekhukhune took over the leadership of Batlokwa, Mmanthatisi was still a strong influence for the remainder of her life and continued to be respected and loved by her people. On the other hand, Sekhukhune was less popular. Under his leadership, Batlokwa was subject to constant fluctuating fortunes. This was partly due to Sekhukhune's appetite for raiding and war. In his actions and decisions, Kgosi Sekhukhune could not have been more different to his mother. Mmanthatisi succeeded in exerting authority over Batlokwa without losing her femininity. This was evident when she once sent warriors out into the field to forage for grain. Traditionally, foraging and gathering was the work of women and children who provided food for themselves. It is a tribute to Mmanthatisi that the proud warriors obeyed her without question, and it highlights her concern for the weaker members of her people. Although Sekhukhune grew under the tutelage of Mmanthatisi, their leadership styles differed radically. This was evident in Sekhukhunela's 20-year feud with King Moshoeshoe. This stance, in one way or another, contributed to his downfall. King Moshoeshoe felt that there were more reasons for them to work together and unite their forces in the face of the European encroachment. However, Sekhukhune had a different view of King Moshoeshoe's hand of friendship. He interpreted this as a ploy by the king to subjugate him and Batlokwa. All potential offers made by King Moshoeshoe were rejected out of hand by Sekhukhune. In 1836, Kgosi Mmanthatisi, the legendary warrior queen, was laid to rest in Jwalaboholo, near the modern-day town of Vicksburg.